Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Holy moly, it's Nolan King, the Boston shot caller. He's back, backwards hat and all, means he's ready to go, and he's going to go over the top. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio here in Las Vegas. It's his birthday week. He's anxiously awaiting September 23rd and September 21. More to come on that. The best journalist nominee at the World MMA Awards. We're proud of Mike Bond. He's in Toronto. Give him your vote. If you're a fan of his work, give a vote to MMA Junkie as well. The voting is still open. We're up for best media source. Goes is going to double up on the ones and twos. Let's get started, guys. All right, Jose Aldo retired from MMA this past weekend. Junior held the WEC and UFC featherweight titles and had 7 title defenses along the way. React, fellas. This guy was a legend. What was your favorite Aldo fight or moment in his stellar career? Also, if you want to throw it in, is he the greatest featherweight of all time? We're starting off with Nolan. 4 minutes are on the clock. Take it.
Yeah, obviously, Jose Aldo, I think it was nice seeing all the appreciation for him online yesterday. I know it was a busy football day, but it seemed like over the span of the day, the news kind of went in every direction, and we had fighters, past opponents, everybody reacting to just an absolute legend. What can you say about the guy? I mean, his records that he has in the featherweight division speak for themselves. The way that he always carried himself was so professional. Was never necessarily about the trash talking. It was about the performances, and he did things that we had never seen in a weight class at the time that the UFC was not. He was a pioneer of that weight class, so to speak. Those lighter weight classes that they brought in from the WEC. And for me, my favorite Jose Aldo moment, if you want to call it that, has to be him running in the crowd after the Chad Mendes knee. I think he was doing that before it was cool, right? We see everybody doing it now. Everybody jumps in the crowd, but when he did it, he had done it in WEC once before in a smaller audience. Then he went out there in Brazil and did it, knocking out Chad Mendes at the buzzer. I mean, that was just an all-time moment. And I think when people look at Jose Aldo's career, that image of him with, in the crowd with them all lifting him up, he's not caring about security or anything. He's got no shoes on. He's running through where there's beer. It's just awesome. It was something that people will try to replicate it, but they'll never be able to. And just in terms of the best of all time discussion, I think at this point in time, he has to be. And sure, he lost to Conor McGregor. He lost to Max Holloway, these other guys that held the featherweight title. But to me, when you look at the body of work, there's nobody that was able to have a title reign like Jose Aldo. And Alex Volkanovski getting close, but I think if you ask me right now to pick between the two of them, I still have to go with Aldo.
All right, good stuff, Nolan. And yeah, I remember that, man. I remember they put him down, and then the journalists had to go back to cage side to do their work. All right, Goes, you're up next.
Oh, man, if you're going to ask me for my greatest moment, there's so many of them, but I'm going to go to UFC 156 where he fought Frankie Edgar. I thought that was an amazing fight. It was as close to a video game as you can get with Jose Aldo, man. He picked poor Frankie Edgar apart, and Frankie was a tank at that time. And if you remember that card, there were 4 Brazilians on that card, and all 3 had won up until that moment. Jose became the 4th, so it was really fun to see Brazil celebrate on that one. But so many good Jose Aldo moments. If you're going to ask me if he's the greatest of all time, I think he's the greatest featherweight champion of all time, but not the greatest featherweight of all time. It's hard to argue against title defenses. That's what that's all about. But when you have 2 guys that are in the running, and Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, who have wins over him, that's kind of hard to argue too. So you can talk me into it, Nolan, Mike. You guys can talk me into it, George, but it won't last for very long because I feel like those 2 will make up that ground.
All right. And I remember that night, Goes. I think that was Bigfoot over Overeem, Little Nog over Rashad. Huge night, man, for the Brazilians. All right, Mike Bond, finish things up.
Yeah, I agree with both these guys on kind of the featherweight GOAT take. I think right now, today, Aldo does have it, but Alexander Volkanovski is, nipping at his heels pretty quickly here. He gets a couple more wins, and I think he's the guy. And of course, he has the head-to-head victory as well. But as far as favorite moment, it was actually one just right down the street here in Toronto for me, UFC 129, the walkout against Mark Homnick, the first real stadium show for the UFC attendance record. I think like 56,000 people. I'll never forget the atmosphere there. That was the last event I attended actually as a fan before, becoming a media member and all that stuff and going down that path. So it really just stands out to me. Obviously the hematoma on the head, just so much in that kind of that moment. And that's the one that for Aldo just really, stays near and dear. But there's obviously so many good ones for him. He has a illustrious career, shout out to the WEC days where he, turned Uriah Faber's leg into pulp. That was a crazy one. So there's endless Jose Aldo moments, and we appreciate everything he did for us and everything he provided. And hopefully this next chapter takes care of the world.
Yeah, well said, guys. Proper ending by Mike Bond. So we'll just move on. And yeah, enjoy retirement, Jose Aldo. Although I'd love to see you fight at that Brazil card. Topic 2, Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. They had 2 press conferences this past week, LA and Phoenix. Things went pretty smooth. Both sides respectful. But this isn't a freebie here, all right? It's going to be a pay-per-view on Showtime. So I need to know, guys, are you in or are you out? 4 minutes are on the clock. Goes. It's on you, sir.
I'm in. Take my money, man. I'm more fired up now. But here's the deal, because the press conference did fire me up more. But usually it's Jake Paul that gets me fired up. In this one, we're finally in a fight where I feel like it's 50-50. I enjoy watching Anderson Silva box. The thing about him is he doesn't seem like one of these guys that's just learning enough boxing to kind of compete. He looks like he started from ground zero as far as technique, and he's just learning really fast because that's who he was in MMA, right? He wasn't always the great Anderson Silva. He suffered some losses, but he rebuilt himself. And I think he's doing that right now as a boxer. He's very fun to watch. But the thing about this matchup is something that came out of the pressers. I think Jake Paul needs to get nasty because Jake Paul needs to get into that guy's head, force him to do things that he's not going to normally do, because you got to remember, Jake Paul, is the king of getting people out of their comfort zones before a fight, but Anderson's the guy that does it during a fight. He'll make you look silly. He'll make you do all kinds of things. And I don't know how Jake Paul's going to react to that. Jake Paul's going to really have to become a boxer in that moment, back him up, start going to the body, because if he starts chasing Anderson Silva, it's going to be good night. He's going to get frustrated. So I want to see some more interaction. I want to see Jake Paul be more of Jake Paul.
Yeah, and it sells tickets. Let's not forget that. All right, Mike, are you in or out?
I'm definitely in, but I guess for kind of different reasons than goes here. I think the fight just speaks for itself in a way. I think Jake Paul's approaching this, the correct way. Like, he goes in there and he starts talking mad trash to Anderson Silva. I think it comes across inauthentic. Like, he's saying, I respect this guy. He's the nicest guy in the world. These are all very true things that he needs to say. He goes in there and he starts saying, he's old, he sucks, blah, blah, blah. That just takes away from his own win if it eventually happens. He wants to, praise him and prop him up as he said, the greatest striker of all time, the legendary Anderson Silva. So that's the way he should be taking it here. When it comes to the in-cage stuff, we'll see what the kind of tact is from Anderson on the night of the fight, if he tries to do that taunting and get in Jake Paul's head, as the Go said. But I think right now, the way they went for it, it was nice. We had some cool, like, viral little moments up there. The Chael Sonnen element at those press conferences was fun too. So I think they executed this really well. The fight is not that far off at this point, a little over a month away. So I don't think we need some crazy long build where all this wild stuff happens. I think the intrigue of this matchup, seeing Jake Paul take on this fight, I think a lot of us have been asking for a while. It just speaks for itself. So I'm all the way in. I'm looking forward to this fight going down.
All right, Nolan, finish things off. Are you in or are you out? Remember, it's not a freebie, man. You got to pony up.
Yeah, no, I'm in. I mean, at this point, like I tweeted when this was announced, he's done the unthinkable. He's got me to care about this now. I'm kind of invested to a certain degree. I think, when he went up against Tyron Woodley, to see Woodley get knocked out like that, it was kind of like, that's probably not great for your legacy, but like, kind of a shrug. If we see Anderson Silva get flattened by Jake Paul, like, everybody in MMA has a sad ending. I think that's going to be like the saddest ending ever. So as an MMA person, I'm not one of these like MMA versus boxing, we got to stop Jake Paul. But like, at the same time, do I want that on some sort of highlight reel? Do I want Anderson Silva face down on the mat with the guy that picked up boxing 2 years standing over him? Not particularly. So I think there is a certain amount of investment here. And I like that Jake Paul went back to the MMA well. I like that he actually diverged from trying to fight, the quote unquote real boxer. And Anderson Silva kind of checks that box too. I mean, he's 3-0. He's obviously got some skills. He's beaten some legit guys. And so, yeah, I think that this is kind of a home run. I think the fact that it's not something that's 6 months away. Like, it's here. You know what I mean? People can get excited about it now, and before we know it, it's going to happen. So I'll be interested to see what they do with the undercard, if they make it more MMA oriented. Overall, I think so far, though, they've nailed it.
Man, I'm all about MMA versus boxing. We've been getting our ass kicked in that department. We need this one. So, yeah, go Anderson Silva. And by the way, Jake Paul, man, that was like a size medium he was wearing all the way around. That outfit, I don't know about that outfit. Of course, I'm not one to talk. But anyway, Aspen Ladd did not compete this past weekend, excuse me, guys, at UFC Fight Night 210. She came in 2 pounds over, and the fight was scratched. This isn't the first time that Ladd has had issues with the weight cutting, as you all know. She's a talented fighter, there's no denying that. But where do you believe her future lies now after this latest incident? UFC, outside the UFC, 135, 145, what do you think is next? Mike, 4 minutes are on the clock. Get the party started.
So, I mean, I'm kind of the opinion 3 strikes and you're out, right? And Aspen Ladd has missed weight 3 times now at 135. Oddly enough, she's never actually fought after missing weight. She's always either had the fight canceled or was not cleared to compete. So we've never actually seen her step in the octagon and fight heavy, but still the track record is very, very bad on that end of it. And I think if the UFC opts to keep her around, which we've heard nothing from Aspen Ladd, we've heard nothing from any UFC executives, Dana White or anything on what her future looks like at this point at the time of this recording. But I think if they're going to keep her around, it has to be at 45, right? Like, it makes no sense to allow her to keep going to 35 if you're going to run this risk. And the opponents, they get screwed out of a training camp, a fight, a payday, all this stuff. It's just completely unfair. It's kind of reminds you of, like a John Lineker back in the day where they gave him so many chances to make 125 and he just kept botching it. And at some point you need to pull the plug. So if she insists on wanting to fight at 35, maybe that's where they part ways. Who knows? I think there is options for her outside the UFC. 145 division, of course, Bellator has a reasonably strong one, much more developed than the UFC. And then maybe a wild card, you never know. Aspen Ladd versus Kayla Harrison in PFL at some point, maybe once they get through the season and they start, this pay-per-view league, all that kind of stuff. That's a semi-notable fight. So there's options outside the UFC for Ladd, but if they're going to keep her around, no question, it's 145.
Nolan, how about you, man? What do you think here?
Yeah, I mean, I never want to see anybody like lose their job, or, I'm somebody that advocates for good fighter treatment. But at the same time, I just feel like this isn't really working out, to understate the whole thing. I think that this relationship, especially where Mike just alluded to, like, there's other options out there. I think there are things that would work much better. I wouldn't be necessarily opposed to the UFC just saying, hey, look, we tried this over and over again, but like, you didn't meet the minimum requirements that you're supposed to just, to show up to even for us to even judge you on performance or anything. Like, we invest in flying you out here and then these fights don't happen. And fighters like Sarah McMahon, who's 41 years old, who did a training camp, who already got her fight against you delayed, now doesn't have anybody to fight. And she has to sit on the shelf and we have to pay her. So it's just a nightmare to a certain degree. And I think, especially where Aspen Ladd is still fairly young and there's other divisions out there that could use her, like, I think both sides might be better off just coming to an agreement that says, hey, we're going to part ways.
45 could definitely use her. That way they could have a 4-woman tournament. How about you guys?
I think that's exactly what the UFC does. I think they're going to keep her around. Look, physically, yes, it's not healthy for her. But let's talk a little bit about the mental side. At some point, you have to consider her sanity, and she's been through a lot, right? Like, when you talk about her injury, the recovery, we talked to her, George, about that recovery and how brutal that was for her. Add in the weight issues. That's got to be weighing on her mentally. And I think we've seen that when she fights, she just doesn't look happy to be out there anymore. It doesn't seem like something she enjoys to do. So my advice is for her to kind of step away for a while and really reevaluate what it is you're doing. Is this something that you love? If you love something and it gets taken away, you start to miss it. And sometimes I think that's what fighters need. We saw Marlon Moraes. He just gave up on the sport and now he's back. So I think she just needs something to kind of reinvigorate what she has going on there, get that fire going again for mixed martial arts. But I think the UFC could still use her, but I think that door on 135 should be closed for now.
Yeah, I'm with you guys, man. I'm all about 145 for her. I'm joking. I know there's not many women in that division, but it's still there. So go there. If you can sort it out, great, come back. But what's amazing to me, guys, is she hikes like 5 or 10 miles every day. Like she's so like she's out of shape, and then she probably does her camp. So whatever's happening, yeah, it does seem like it's unsafe. She should go to 45, and we should go to topic number 4. Here we go. This is a good one. The great GSP recently did an interview with Helen Yee from Helen Yee Sports, where he admitted that there are 2 fights that eluded him in his illustrious career. Anderson Silva and Khabib Nurmagomedov are the 2 names he gave. Whether it was agreeing to certain terms or the timing pertaining to both parties, the fights just never came to fruition. How do you guys think GSP would have fared if the fights had gone down? Nolan, we're coming back to you. 4 minutes are on the clock.
I think obviously either one of them would have been tough. It's a shame we never saw either one of them. Let's start with that, especially the Anderson fight. I feel like that is the one we don't talk about enough that really got away. Like that could have been all-time, legendary moment where 2 of the all-time greats fight in a fairly comfortable weight class. It's not like somebody's moving up 2 or, whatever. I think that's just one that I'm bummed we never got to see. But for me, I think I would favor GSP in that fight stylistically. I think the fact that, he could bulk up to 185. It's not like he's, cutting a ton of weight, or Anderson's cutting a ton of weight. I think that would have been a good matchup to see at middleweight, but I would lean with GSP. As for Khabib, I would also lean with GSP kind of for the opposite reason. I think that his grappling and strength would have been solid at 170. Like I know GSP's hinted at maybe doing 155 in the past. Like he said he could make it or whatever. But again, I feel like that would have probably been at 170 where GSP was a little bit more shaped and healthy for that weight class than Khabib would be. But who knows, man? I mean, this is one of those topics. We could have this topic 10 years from now because neither of these fights, I would like to think neither of these fights are going to happen. Who knows? Tito Chuck 3 happened. So I guess I can't rule anything out, but I'm going to be, I know Mike's usually Mr. Canada on staff, but I'm going to be 2-0 with GSP in this fantasy prediction.
All right. So you think there's still a shot, huh? Send location. Let's do it. Next up is Goes.
Well, I think the fact that we're even having this conversation is what makes GSP so great, right? There aren't that many scenarios that we can even talk about. So that's why we have to get into the realm of what if. And the reason we have to do that is because GSP fought everyone, all the top fighters of his time. And that sometimes doesn't translate to some of the top fighters that we talk about. So to make something actually happen, we would need him to go up to fight Anderson Silva. I don't know if that goes his way, guys. I think I'm going to put GSP at 1-1. I wouldn't be shocked if he beat Anderson Silva. But Anderson Silva was one of the bigger guys at that weight class. And I feel like it might have just been too much size. I know GSP did okay with Michael Bisping. He handled that. But Anderson just seems bigger. I don't know. I think that might not go his way. But even if it didn't, is it really an L? He's going up in weight to challenge one of the greatest fighters of all time. With Khabib, I feel like they missed the boat a little bit, and they missed the boat in this. You should have done it at 165 and introduced that weight class.
Yes.
That would have been the perfect scenario to do that. All right. They go like this, right? One guy comes down, one guy goes up. They meet in the middle. I think it would have been the perfect scenario. And I think GSP being so good at his game plans, his fighter IQ, I think maybe he would have edged out Khabib, but it would have been close. But I got him going 1-1, guys.
All right. How about you, Mike Bond? What are your thoughts here?
This is a tricky one. There's just so many elements that go in there. Like, I think if Anderson and GSP were going to fight, this was probably going to be like 2008, 2009. I know they want to do like a 178 catch weight. That had been talked about at some point. Anderson could cut down. The big reason GSP didn't want to do it is because there was no formal drug testing program. You can read into that, whatever there was. This is pre-USADA days, all that stuff. So there was a lot of hiccups involved, but all things being equal, I do think at that moment, Anderson was just, riding an incredible wave that I think it was really hard for him to be touched at that moment. And I think the size, all that stuff may have been just a little bit too much for GSP back in that moment. And then you kind of fast forward to what we're talking, 2009 or 2019, 2020 for a fight against Khabib. Georges St-Pierre at that point is like, flirting with being 40 years old. Khabib is in his prime. So I have a hard time, envisioning GSP. I think he would have made it competitive. I think it would have been super fascinating. But at that moment, I think, Khabib was on the top of the world. So I would have given him the edge in that fight too, even if they were going up and doing it at 165 or 170 where Khabib has never fought. So these are ones we could, as Nolan kind of alluded to, we could dance around this topic and give our takes forever. And we probably will when it comes to this kind of fantasy matchmaking. But for me, I think GSP probably might have lost both those fights.
Ooh, okay.
Hand in your maple leaf.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, honestly, but I'm thinking he loses to Anderson but beats Khabib. That's my first inkling without just really getting into it. Anyway, all right. Topic number 5. Here we go. Terrance McKinney has some concerns over the new footwear in the UFC. He had this message towards Dwayne The Rock, at The Rock. So you guys know who that is, former WWE star. Hey, brother, at The Rock, if you're a fan of what we do, make the deal favorable for ones modeling your shoe, McKinney tweeted. He continues, I get it's not your fault or your business doing it to us, but show us the love you think you are. Show us the love you think you are. That's his tweet. I'm just reading how he wrote it. Get in our corner and support us. That's the end. McKinney's comments were in response to a tweet from The Rock pertaining to the deal, which I know Kamikaze will include, but I'll read the first part of it. Dwayne Johnson had tweeted, "Our at UFC and at Project Partnership is anchored in hard work and legacy. Work ethic and legacy are pillars of all UFC athletes." So, guys, let me ask you, what do you make of McKinney's approach to the matter? 4 minutes are on the clock, and goes, you're leading off.
I applaud him for speaking up. Not everybody really has the guts to do that and express their opinion when you're under that UFC banner. It's kind of a tough thing to do because you never know how they're going to react. But I think he makes a good point. You know, a lot of athletes have sort of lost their personalities along the way. First, we started with Reebok, and now with Venom, they all just kind of look alike. They don't have those avenues to express themselves and create characters, right? So gone are the days of the icicles on the shorts, the flames on the shorts for Tito, the iconic yellow and black for Anderson Silva. They can't really do that. So if you're going to take that away, I think you need to compensate them a little bit more. Now, as they said, it's not really probably in The Rock's hands, but I'm sure he could maybe say something or do something. I love the fact that he brought it up because it does bring eyeballs to the situation, which can be kind of dire. But if I'm The Rock, man, I pick up the phone and give the kid a call because, honestly, you saw what happened with Reebok and how quick Reebok wanted to get the hell out of that deal. The backlash sometimes for some of these deals can be pretty nasty. And so I think at the very least, The Rock, pick up the phone, give this kid a call. If you smell what that goes, it's cooking. And it's chili.
All right. How about you, Mike? What did you think of McKinney's approach?
Well, as the hardest worker in the room, I mean, I can just really relate to what these guys are all talking about here. I'm kidding. That's the slogan for these shoes that they're doing. But yeah, I mean, with what Goes is saying there, I understand it. But like The Rock making a phone call to Terrance McKinney, say he's like, hey, I want to take care of you on the side. That doesn't address the real issue here. The real issue is that the UFC continues to sign endorsement deals, television deals, et cetera, where the fighters are not getting a percentage like they would if they had, a union, an association, or whatever, some sort of collective bargaining, where when these deals come to pass, they get their fair share. But now, instead of that, it's just you show up to UFC fight night, whatever, at the Apex, and they say, here's this pair of shoes. You now have to start wearing these for all media events or at the weigh-ins for the rest of the week. And you see someone like Nate Diaz who can make it hilarious. That little clip he posted with Megan O'Leary was great, but that's just him trashing it. So, yeah, I mean, what you would like to see happen here is obviously the fighters get a proper percentage and all get out from this instead of just being told to wear it. And you can take home the sneakers after, and we'll give you an extra pair for, your cousin or something. So that's what I'd like to see happen. I know, The Rock is probably not individually involved in these conversations. He probably has a team who negotiated with the UFC, and then he just films a commercial or whatever and goes on his way. But he's being in this position as a WWE superstar. He knows what it's like to be, quote unquote, take advantage of by a promoter and like Vince McMahon. So you would hope he would side a little further more on the side of the athletes here and, make sure they are getting their fair share. But when it comes to massive corporate deals and things like that, that's just not the way it goes.
All right. How about you, Nolan?
Yeah. I mean, Mike just is spot on there. I think that, as somebody that, if you guys follow me on Twitter and stuff, I'm not necessarily one to be constantly complaining about this, that, and the other thing. But I think when it comes to fighter pay, that's the biggest issue. It's, for fans out there that maybe don't necessarily talk to people behind the scenes as much, I cannot understate to you how much of it is, how much people in the industry, fighters, managers, coaches, feel like they're being taken advantage of. And this is just another thing on that list, the laundry list of things that they feel like, the UFC is making money off of it and they're not seeing a dime from it. will there be some sort of thing at the end of the year where everybody gets paid a certain amount for this? Who knows? But at this point in time, it doesn't seem like they're getting paid. And that's wrong. I mean, at least with the Reebok deal, the Venom deal now, they get something. But with this, they're getting nothing.
Yeah. And did you guys happen to see what Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez are rumored to make this past weekend? Holy cow. $45 million for Canelo, 20 for Triple G. That is a lot of money. I want to ask you guys this question on a little bit of overtime. Great stuff here on Topic 5. But I asked Goes this earlier this morning. Can anyone say I'm the equivalent of Canelo Alvarez in terms of the brand that he is? I should make that amount of money. Would anyone even have that argument aside from maybe Conor McGregor?
Nolan?
I mean, it's tough to conceptualize, right? Because I think the Canelo pull that we don't necessarily wrap, me up here in New England I can't wrap my head around sometimes how big these international superstars are. Like, I think we underestimated as MMA fans how big Khabib was, like, just because of how big and popular he was in one region of the world. So I obviously Canelo is kind of a similar thing there. Like, I think that his Latin American community definitely shuts down when he fights, and it's a huge deal. But sometimes I think it's hard to wrap our heads around. So I think that off the top of my head, Canelo level in the UFC right now, besides Conor McGregor, I don't think so.
Right, and the fighters are going to want that, and I don't know if they can actually bring that argument. Mike, I'm sorry to cut you off. I also wanted to point out, what about even Triple G at 20 million? You know what I mean? Like, boxing, man, you got to tip your hat to what they get. But sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there doesn't necessarily need to be a comparison. I don't think that's what we're really asking for. I don't think anyone necessarily sits here and expects, even though we'd love to see it, these guys to get paid 45 million, 20 million. We'd just like to see them get their fair share to a degree. Even if, fighter pay goes from the reported 18 to 20% to 30%, that's still a massive jump for most of these fighters and still a lot more in their pocket. So like a step towards that direction. I mean, there's so many different levels of where the revenue comes in. How much money, did the UFC make on ticket sales going to London, putting, a Paddy Pimblett on the card or something like that? How much did he get a cut of each of those ticket sales, or, in arena merchandise, or whatever the case may be? So like there's individual guys that for specific events where they put them can bring in a whole lot of revenue, but once again, they don't get a cut of that.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff, guys. Folks, we got no UFC card this weekend, but there is Bellator in action. There's always stuff going on. Final week of Dana White Contender Series, and that's why you should have it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the week. Check out the YouTube page as well. Subscribe there. Lots goes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/MMA Junkie video, where this video will appear. I'll be throwing elbows in the comment section. Let's see who's got some good stuff, some feedback here on the show. We'll see you next week here on Spinning Back Clique.